Welcome back to the Scaredy Cat Guide, my friends. My name is Jenny, and today we are talking about Revenge of the Mummy at Universal Studios, Florida. If you're new here, this is the channel where we talk about theme parks and anxiety, we talk about sensory issues, and really just anything that you might want to know if you're an anxious rider like me. Now, Revenge of the Mummy is an attraction that has been around for quite some time. It is very thrilling, very fun, and definitely one of the scariest rides in all of Universal. Without further ado, let's dive into those details. This Universal classic contains high speeds, darkness, and some very scary theming. On top of that, this attraction also contains some drops and other coaster maneuvers, sudden starts and stops, and many sensory elements. So let's start off by talking about the thrill elements here. Now, while this coaster is actually fairly mild on paper, it definitely falls into that category of feeling more intense because of the darkness. In this respect, it's very similar to Cosmic Rewind or Space Mountain that we've talked about before, in the sense that its thrill elements are definitely heightened by the darkness and make it feel overall a lot more intense than it would be if it were a standard outdoor coaster. Now, this is not to say that this particular coaster doesn't have any interesting coaster elements. We do have a few maneuvers like a launch towards the beginning of the ride and several unexpected drops. Now, personally, I would say that the drops are really the shining moment for this particular coaster. Most of the track really does just kind of twist and turn and meander, but the drops are really where you feel that thrilling sensation. Now, when it comes to speed, this coaster actually caps out at a top speed of 45 miles per hour. Just to put that into perspective, it's just a little bit faster than Slinky Dog Dash over in Disney's Hollywood Studios. Where this coaster is 45 miles an hour, Slinky Dog is 40, so just a 5 mile per hour difference. Now, on top of all these thrill elements, we also do have some backwards motion, but it is very brief and really not that fast. This happens right before the coaster actually sets off, and you just zip backwards for a couple of seconds before the ride rotates back around and you will continue forwards. Now, moving right along, let's talk about these sensory elements. Now, first of all, there is plenty of spooky, eerie darkness on this attraction. Now, on top of this darkness, we also have multiple flame effects, and these are intense. You really feel the heat with every single one of these, and it's definitely enough for someone like me who has sensory issues to feel very uncomfortable. Now, rest assured, you will not be burned by these flames, even if it looks like you will be, but just know that there are several of these throughout the ride, and that they are pretty intense when it comes to flame effects. Now, we also have one instance of water effects. This happens towards the end of the ride, where you feel this water shower down on you, and it's really meant to feel like oil showering down on you, because shortly after, the ceiling catches fire, and it's really a pretty intense sequence overall. On top of all these sensory effects, we also have, of course, our fair share of flashing lights. We have very loud noises and sound design. It's also important to note that a lot of the sound design is, again, intentionally scary. So we have roars and shouts and screams and scary bug noises. So really, that loud sound design can do more than just set you on edge in a sensory way. It definitely adds to the scariness and the spookiness as well. Now, on that note, let's talk about the intentionally scary theming here. Of course, keeping in the spirit of the Mummy movie franchise, this attraction is sometimes campy, but overall genuinely frightening. Of course, we have some silly moments, but there's definitely an undercurrent of just straight up spookiness, scariness, and even horror on this attraction. We, of course, have menacing animatronics and figures that feel very threatening. These aren't the typical animatronics you'll come across in most Disney rides. These are real deal monsters. And of course, as I talked about before, we have loud roars, loud sound design, and some creepy visuals on screen, including bugs and malevolent spirits. Now, finally, let's touch on the very rough ride system here. Now, we of course will have some sudden starts and stops that will almost certainly bang your head against the seat, so be prepared for that. Of course, it is usually recommended to keep your head pushed back against the seat on attractions like this to prevent this. However, this ride is so rough that it really really doesn't seem to help in my opinion. Many movements on this attraction feel very jarring, and this is just a result of this being a very old ride. Of course, a rough ride system is nothing new when it comes to other attractions we've reviewed here on the channel, but let me just tell you that this one is pretty extreme, so just be prepared for that. Now let's talk about those ride vehicles. Now what we have here is a one-car system seating 16 guests in 4 rows of 4. Of course, we have a simple lap bar, just like what you'll find on most Disney coasters. There is no overhead harness or anything like that, so to me, the restraints didn't feel super claustrophobic. Now last but not least, let's talk about that ride duration. Revenge of the Mummy clocks in at 3 minutes and 15 seconds, which is pretty standard for other coasters like this one. This also could be a bonus if you're nervous about the many elements on this coaster, and it could be encouraging knowing that you will be on and off this in just a few minutes. And now that you have all the facts, let's actually go hop in line. I am so excited, maybe a little bit nervous. This one is intense, but we're gonna do it together, so let's go hop in line. You'll find the entrance to this attraction in the New York section of Universal Studios. Now, like with many other Universal rides, you will need to put your belongings into lockers before you can step into the queue. Just to the left of this attraction, you'll find the locker room. You'll be able to scan your tickets, put in your belongings, and of course, get them out again afterwards by scanning your tickets again. You also will find the test seats right around this area, and like always, I do recommend checking out those test seats, especially if you're claustrophobic like I am. It can really put your mind at ease just getting to sit down, see what it feels like, and determine whether or not these restraints will be a problem for you. Now, once you do put your belongings away, you can enter the queue and make your way inside. Now, the great thing about this queue is that it is entirely inside, so of course you get some lovely AC as you're waiting in line. You'll snake your way through this lobby area and see some very cool props from the making of the movies. We also have some screens overhead that are bringing you the lore of this particular attraction. And I would definitely recommend taking the time to watch what's on screen because it really does add to the experience. It's funny, it's campy, and overall it's one of the things that just makes this attraction. Now, after passing through this lobby area, you will very quickly find yourself in an ancient Egyptian setting. Of course, there are more very cool props. You'll find yourself in a series of dimly lit rooms. And from this point onwards, the queue really does take on a kind of spooky vibe. There are some piped in sounds, some flickering lights. There are also a couple of interactive elements in this queue. These are just little things that you can place your hand on, press a button, and some of these even cause reactions across the rest of the queue to spook the other guests. Overall, it makes for a very entertaining wait for this particular attraction, but I could definitely see it being a little bit too spooky for some of our younger guests or just people who are sensitive to scary things like me. Now, after you make your way through this series of dimly lit rooms, you will find yourself in a larger area where there is this amazing statue suspended above you. I just love the theming for this attraction. I think it is so cool. Of course, I am a fan of the Mummy movie franchise, but the detail in this queue is just astounding. You'll snake your way around this room once again before coming to your first team member who will send you up the stairs. Now, after making your way up the stairs, you first of all will get to see this amazing statue from a different perspective, which is very cool. And you will either head to the right or left before very quickly coming upon your second team member who will sort you into your lanes. Once we set off, we get right into the spookiness. You will find yourself meandering through these catacombs with mummies all around, some spooky sound design, and of course, darkness. It isn't long, however, before we run into our friend Reggie, who has been wrapped up and mummified before our eyes. He's telling you to turn around when all of a sudden Imhotep bursts out of his sarcophagus and tells you he's going to steal your souls. Now, very quickly, you'll find yourself in this very cool throne room-like area where you once again come face to face with Imhotep, but this time on screen. You'll see this very creepy face as he says menacing things to you, and just as you are drawing closer, these figures spring up on either side of you, and we see some of those flame effects that I talked about. Now, these figures are static, they are not animatronics, and they really just stand there and look scary. However, when they do pop up, it is a bit of a jump scare. It happens very quickly, there's a loud noise that comes along along with it. And it's definitely a very startling and very scary moment on this attraction. Now we'll continue right along just as a wall is coming down, looking like it's about to cut us off from our way out. However, we get through just fine, but unfortunately find ourselves at a dead end. Now this is where the bug sequence happens. We're staring at this dead end when all of a sudden these scarabs come out of the walls with these creepy noises, and we suddenly find ourselves going backwards. Now this backwards section, like I said, is very short. You'll just slide backwards for a bit before coming to a very abrupt halt, and the ride vehicle will start to rotate. Now we see Imhotep again in this very creepy spirit form on screen, and after turning all the way around, we gear up for the launch. Now even though this little coaster section starts off slowly, we will pick up speed very, very quickly with this initial launch and be thrown into the coaster segment of this attraction. Now, like I said, the drops are really the shining star here, and after the launch, there really isn't much to speak of besides the drops. Now, after this coaster segment, you will come to a stop, and it looks like the ride is over. However, things are not as they appear. We see a team member in the little box to our left suddenly get their soul taken, and the glass breaks. We see another animatronic of Imhotep in their place, and this is where we have those water effects and the flame effects that, like I said, are pretty darn intense. Now we are not here for very long as the coaster continues and we find ourselves going down the largest drop of the attraction. Like I said, this does feel pretty intense, but it's one of the last drops that we have because very, very quickly the ride comes to an end and we find ourselves facing a screen where we get to see Brendan Fraser finally getting his cup of coffee, only to be attacked by the mummy, unfortunately. Now after this, we will find ourselves back at the loading station and a team member will help you disembark. Now exiting this attraction is pretty straightforward. You'll make your way down a series of hallways and ultimately find yourself out at the gift shop, which I love looking around, by the way. It's very cool. And once you're done perusing, you can make your way outside back into the beautiful Florida sunshine. And there we have it. What do you think about Revenge of the Mummy? I find this attraction very scary, but in a really fun way. This is an interesting attraction in the sense that it's not terribly intense on paper, but all the elements put together, the spookiness, the sensory elements, the outright scariness of this attraction can really add up to be a pretty intense time. Really quickly, I'd love to give a special thanks to Undercover Tourists for their footage of the actual ride. Of course, like with most Universal rides, I was unable to bring my camera on the ride itself, so it means the world to be able to use these clips and show you guys exactly what to expect on ride. Now, as always, if you enjoyed this ride review and would like to see more like it, don't forget to like, subscribe, stick around, stay a while. We would love to have you in our little community of anxious riders. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next one.